million miles of water. Tom furrowed his brow. Why do you want to farm here? Yord made a face. To the young Sunstorm Orc it was obvious. I've done my years in the Legions, and now I want to settle down. I want to make things grow with my hands. I've been listening to the Urende talk a lot about that lately. The older man laughed. Sure, fine, but you misunderstand me. Why here? I'm not saying it's easy growing up in Scarsind, but you can make a living there. The soil... He bent down and picked up a pile of earth. Letting it crumble under his fingers, the dry, arid ground of the eastern shore of the bay spun off into the winter wind. You're fighting the land. Every step of the way here, it doesn't want to grow. Now, up in the hills, maybe there's enough shelter and enough scrubs to support some herding. It'll hardly be straightforward, though. Strive, toil, and claim the just rewards of your labours, yes. But there's no sense striving for the sake of striving. You catch me, youngster? Yord made a sullen face. I catch you? You reckon we could mine, then, like they do in your Mournwold? Tom cocked his head. It isn't my Mourn. I'm a Stockland man, born and bred myself, but yes, maybe. There's good mining here. That's what the wizard said who checked it out, didn't they? And that's what they say, isn't it? He gestured towards the travellers, who were camped a little distance away. From here, Yord could see the lights of their fires, fading now as the night grew long, and not for the first time, he found himself intrigued by the visitors, the first foreigners he'd ever met. He'd liked them. They'd treated him and the other Imperial Orcs like this was their home, not just the Empire's land, but theirs, which it was, of course, but they'd shown that they knew it. Polite guests, just as Tom and the other Marchers and the Freeborn and the rest were polite guests, of course. The funny thing about the Skurrans, though, is that the voices in his head didn't quite know what to do with them. There was no history there, no ancient warnings and ancestral urgings to heed or ignore. Tom spoke again. The Skurrans know their stuff. I'm not disputing that. It sounds like they can bring the water down from the deep hills. The question is, young one, what will you do with it when it comes? I'm sure the Freeborn will do you right and give the soil the drink it needs, and I can tell you the land's got potential, there's no doubt about that. If this place got as much rain in a year as my house does in springtime, you'd have no issue. Mineral rich, the soil is. Won't grow as good as Marcherland, though, as we've been managing it a long time, so's to be expected. You'll be doing all that work, spending all that coin just to get a fairly decent crop. Farming isn't about what you plant, young one. It's about what it costs you to sow, and what you sell it for. Yord fell silent, thoughtful. He looked across the plains and hills of Merev. It was a clear night, and from here you could even see the twinkling lights of Biori in the far distance. He thought about all that he'd done, all that everyone had done to get here, to make this place theirs. He thought of gardens. After a little while spending time with his friend in the silence, he spoke. Sometimes it isn't about that. Sometimes it's about making the world bloom, because you can. It's about planting trees so that the next generation has a place to sit in the shade. We're not growing crops here, Tom. He waved his hands, trying to articulate the point. We're growing time. The landskeeper smiled. Fine then. Let's talk in a little more practical detail about what that might mean, shall we? Overview. The Imperial Orcs were recently assigned the territory of Merev, and have given every indication that they intend to make it a permanent home, just as they have done with Scarsind. On top of the political and logistical problems facing Merev, some of which the Empire has taken steps to address, there are the challenges posed by its geography. Like the rest of the Broken Shore, Merev is warm and dry with little in the way of large-scale vegetation. 3 of its regions, Ikarian, Nadir, and Yorodal, are arid, with little access to fresh water and, consequently, food. This is a major barrier to growing the territory's prosperity and attracting more Imperial Orcs from distant Scarsind to venture here. Farms struggle to grow crops or raise herds on such dry ground. Marcher experts from Mitwold and Upwold, and freeborn talented in drawing prosperity and growth from barren earth, have been invited to the territory on the urging of their national assemblies. After all, the freeborn have some familiarity with living in arid lands, and the green hands of the Marchers are legendary. Neither can work miracles, however. They cannot strike water from the stone where there is none. The experts from the Brass Coast and the Marchers gather together and set themselves to studying the problem immediately. The Brass Coast delegation includes some of those who designed the Iron Kanat over in Segura. They have similar visions for underground channels here in Merev, but there is no good source of water in Urodel or Ikarian. The Marchers are even less optimistic. "Good cider takes good apples," one says, inferring that the land here is poor and unlikely to ever become fertile, at least not without great effort. The Urodel Tunnels. The Great Aqueduct of Urodel could be repaired and used to bring water to the region from the border with Skura. Once the aqueduct is built, the Empire would need to acquire the water from Skura. A good fresh water supply would support a large town here once Kerstag's Way is also completed. This settlement would increase taxation by 4 thrones a season. The aqueduct will remove the arid quality for as long as it is operational. After a couple of weeks, the deadlock is broken by the arrival of another set of visitors, the Skurans. They are dressed in dour and practical clothes, off-whites, dark fabrics, hooded and gloved to protect themselves from the winter chill. Over them, they wear finely worked necklaces and distinctive bracelets with ornate designs. The fabric of their garments might be shabby, but their jewellery is impressive. Their leader introduces herself as Nera, who brings forth water's wonders. She is a tall, stout woman, with blonde hair tied back into a practical ponytail and hands calloused from a lifetime of work. Nera explains that she and her companions represent the Jadefall Water Guardians Cooperative. Jadefall, it seems, is the territory directly to the east of Merev. She has been sent to assess how Skura could bring their water's bounty to Merev. She names it quite carefully, avoiding referring to it by its Skuran name. Apparently a deal has been struck in principle between a representative of Jadefall's Principal Council and the Senator and Legion Engineer, confirming both that the Imperial Orcs are serious about the long-term development of the territory, and that Skura are interested in prosperous trade to help that happen. According to Nera, the ruins that lie in the east of Merev in Urodel include the remains of a great aqueduct and irrigation network. This ruin was once Yorli, one of the Skuran settlements here. When the Skurans lived there, they would transport the water they needed from their holdings in the mountains to the east and distribute it across the region. This was hundreds of years ago, but the irrigation ditches are still there, and the aqueduct could be repaired. If it is rebuilt and the connection to Jadefall restored, water could be supplied to the territory. That would allow a new settlement in Urodel to prosper, once Kerstag's Way is completed. When both are accomplished, the rising population in the area would increase the taxation from the territory by 4 thrones a season. Perhaps, most importantly of all, the improved water supply would remove the arid quality from the region for as long as the aqueduct was working. Restoring the great aqueduct of Urodel would require 15 white granite, 5 weirwood, and 5 mithril, plus labour costs. This would require a commission for an edifice and 75 crowns normally, increased to 90 crowns while neighbouring Ikarian is underdeveloped. The biggest cost may be that the aqueduct will only function while the Skurans provide water, and they drive a hard bargain. A fair trade. The Skurans want 12 thrones a season to supply water to the aqueduct from Jadefall. The alternative is to grant exclusive mining rights to the Skurans in place of payments for the water. This would remove the 12 throne upkeep and any benefits to Imperial Orc mines in the territory. Skurans would open new mines as they settled in Urodel, Clisern, and Nadir. The Skurans claim their supplies of water are limited, and they value them highly. They are not prepared to provide the water for free, but they would be willing to sign a contract with the Empire to sell the Imperial Orcs the water they need. After some negotiation, the Skurrans settle on a price of 12 thrones a season for their water. If that happens, then Jadefall Water Guardians Cooperative guarantee no interruption of service longer than a few weeks, except in the event of war or the hand of the Creator. If this cost proves too much of an ongoing financial commitment for the Senate to bear, then the Skurrans would be prepared to take payment in a different form. Instead of paying the Skurrans for their water, the Imperial Senate could grant them the exclusive right to mine the eastern hills of Merev, in Urodal, Klisarn, and Nadir. It would mean giving up the benefits the Golden Pyramid have recently uncovered for the miners of Merev, but it might be an easier ask, a more straightforward trade of resource for resource. This would add another factor to Merev's already complicated political situation. Once the Skurrans have built their mine workings in the hills, it could prove challenging to remove them should relations sour. One somewhat cynical Sanite participating in the discussions points out that, from a purely military point of view, allowing the Skurrans to work the eastern hills would mean that an invading army acting with Skurran aid would not need a beachhead to begin its conquest. There is no indication that they might, but these regions used to be part of Skura. Are they really so sanguine about giving up any claim to them as they appear? Still, this only represents a cost if there is any risk of such a thing, and every indication is that the Skurrans are eager for a positive diplomatic relationship with the Empire, for the moment. A healing pool. If the Empire make a deal with the Skurrans, then the Senate could commission a healer's pool in Urodal. The healer's pool would, among other things, increase taxation from the region by 2 thrones. Many of the Skurran water guardians carry physician's tools alongside their engineering tools. It appears that Skurrans perceive a close link between health and water. According to their magicians, regularly imbibing clean fresh water can cure many ills and flush sickness and disease from the body, while daily immersion enhances vitality and strength. Just as the water is used to soak the sharpening stone of a knife, regular immersion in water sharpens the mind and the body, allowing for a longer and more fulfilling life. Yet, within the deep holds in the other lands of the Skurrans, water is rarely where it's needed. Deep underground reservoirs must be pumped and aqueducts built to bring water to those it can give life to. The role of a water guardian, therefore, is equal parts practical engineer of civil constructions and healer, albeit one that tends to the health of the whole community rather than just those who have fallen sick. As it is the Skurran practice to combine the provision of water with healthcare and healing, they offer to do the same in Urodal once the aqueduct is restored. If a suitable healer's hall is built, it would help the new settlement grow, increasing taxation, and the Skurrans would share their skills with the Imperial Orcs. They seem enthusiastic about the idea of water guardians and bone setters working alongside one another. They are eager to learn from the Imperial Orc physicians, as well as share their own learning. The healer's pool would need 12 wains of white granite and 60 crowns. Once complete, the Imperial Orcs could use tally of the votes to appoint the bone setter of the healer's pool annually. Provided the Imperial Orcs elected a genuine bone setter to the role, then they would be able to purchase crafted Skurran medical tools each season. A long drift. The Empire could dig a tunnel under the mountains to steal the Skurrans' water. The additional constructions would replace the 12 throne upkeep, but it would infuriate the Skurrans once the theft was discovered. One of the local orcs, a former enterprising Grendel magician merchant called Illa Bered, has an alternative proposal. Illa is a sand mage and has many years of experience working profitably with a water merchant who is a herald of the Mistress of Falls. Together, the two have cooked up a proposal by which the Empire could obtain the water they need without having to pay the greedy Skurrans for it. There is an old mine working on the edge of Urodal, rather oddly known as the Yellowfish Adit. The Adit is largely played out now, but one of the main drifts extends for many miles under the mountains, and all the way into Jadefall. In fact, It appears the region the Mahal Skurans stopped excavating the drift is because it was getting perilously close to one of their largest subterranean lakes. With the help of the Mistress of the Falls, Illa's team could extend the drift to the lake. At that point, the Empire could tap as much water as they needed, and they wouldn't have to pay anyone for it. The Skurans would soon realise it was happening, of course, but they couldn't stop it, because they wouldn't know where the Empire was tapping the lake. They'd complain, bitterly in all likelihood, but who really owns a giant underground lake? Illa's audacious plan relies on restoring the aqueduct so it can carry water from the adit to the ruins. This means the aqueduct would still have to be restored, but the work would all be done with a single commission. Of course, the Skurans are not going to provide help with this proposal, so the Empire would have to operate the aqueduct themselves. But it's just water running down a chute. How complicated can it be? Once the work was complete, it would ensure a continuous supply of water to the Yoredal region without having to pay the Skurans any money, and without any risk of the supply ever being interrupted if relations with them soured. The Nadir Hills. While the aqueduct could provide enough water to irrigate Yoredal, the Skurans are clear that it couldn't provide enough water to cover either of the neighbouring regions. Even if there were enough water, Ikarian is simply too far away and Nadir is too high. No aqueduct can carry water uphill without expensive engineering and a source of power to lift the water. A different solution will be needed elsewhere in the territory. Fortunately, the Marchers may have a solution. Nadir experiences more rainfall than other parts of Merev, but the high hills trap the water in tarns, leaving the lowlands parched and arid. As a result, there isn't enough water to grow crops here, but it is possible to stock the hills with sheep and cattle. What if the Imperial Orcs worked with what they had and farmed cattle? The Imperial Orc Nation already has its experience in this area. They pioneered new techniques in Skarsind when they raised the Great Herd. Why not build on that advantage and raise new herds here in Nadir? The cattle markets. The Imperial Senate could use a Senate motion to temporarily expand the cattle markets in the Marchers. This would allow Marcher farmers bringing cattle to market to exchange them for bonds they could use to sell the cattle to the Imperial Orcs. The herd would need to be driven to Merev, but once there it would remove the arid quality from Nadir. If enough cattle were brought, it would also create a wealthy new sinecure. It's not possible to use local cattle to establish a new great herd in Yoredal. There simply aren't anywhere near enough of them. To establish a new herd, the Imperial Orcs would need to buy a huge number of cattle from elsewhere in the Empire and then drive them all the way to Merev. There are only 2 places in the Empire where they could possibly acquire the number of animals they need: the busy cattle markets of Stockland in Upwold and Wayford in Mitwold. To enable the Imperial Orcs to purchase as many cattle as possible, the civil service proposed to create some large temporary holding pens at the 2 markets. Marcher farmers from Mitwold and Upwold could drive cattle to the market as usual, but rather than selling them immediately, they could register them with the civil service. The farmer would be issued with a bond for their cattle, which they could then take to Anvil to facilitate the disposal of their herd. The Imperial Orcs could negotiate to purchase the cattle directly from the Marcher farms at the spring equinox, with the cattle bonds guaranteeing the sale. In effect, they would employ the same approach used for Bourse notes. If the Imperial Senate can use a motion to create the title of Shepherd of the Southern Herd, then, in the following downtime, any Marcher farm holder that wants to take part could use the coming season to invest in cattle to take to market. Of course, many Marcher farms are arable, but those farmers could buy cattle from their neighbours. They can then drive the cattle to their market and exchange them for cattle bonds with the civil service. The larger the farm, the more cattle bonds they will receive. At the spring equinox, Marcher farmers will be able to use their bonds to sell their cattle to the Imperial Orcs. It will be up to each individual Marcher what price they want to set for their bonds, but the more cattle the Imperial Orcs are able to acquire, the bigger the new herd will be. If the herd is substantial, then it will be large enough to fund a new sinecure. The larger the herd, the greater the income the sinecure will receive. The civil service will issue additional guidance next season once they know how many Marcher farmers have taken the cattle bonds. No Marcher should lose out in this arrangement, since, if they change their mind and elect not to sell their cattle bonds to the Imperial Orcs, they can simply hand them back to the civil service to sell their cattle in the local markets. In fact, individuals might profit from these arrangements, since there could be a shortage of stock available in the two markets in the spring equinox. Each bond will always be worth at least 18 rings when disposed of in Stockland or Wayford, but the fewer cattle bonds that are sold in the local markets, the more each bond will be worth. A long drive. Imperial Orc and Marcher military units would need to escort the drovers as they drive the herd to Merev. This guarding action would last at least 2 seasons and would not provide any reward by default. The action would need a military strength of at least 1,000 each season to make progress. Once these cattle are purchased, then the second problem arises. They will need to be driven across the Empire, from the Marchers to Merev. That would be no easy task. It would need skilled drovers and a substantial escort of guards to ensure the herd reached their destination safely. The Trods would help, of course, but even so it would take 6 months to achieve. Could the Marchers and the Imperial Orcs spare enough military units to guard the herds and the drovers while they complete the dangerous journey? After the spring equinox, a new guarding venture for Marcher and Imperial Orc military units would be created, allowing them to escort the drovers to Merev. The venture wouldn't provide any returns by default. Either the quartermaster would need to apply the Gurdian to the venture, or Imperial Orc bone setters would need to arrange payments individually for those who supported the project. Otherwise, captains would go without. Either way, the Imperial Orcs would need to ensure that the venture had an effective military strength of at least 1,000 for the 2 seasons required to drive the herd to Merev. If there was a shortfall of guards, then the cattle drive would make no progress that season. Once the cows have arrived, Nadir will lose the arid quality, reflecting the sustainable and prosperous ecosystem created in the area. If enough cattle have been procured from the Marcher markets, then the new sinecure will be created. There will be an ongoing problem with the wild drakes that threaten the area. They will inevitably be drawn to the cattle as easy prey, so the new shepherd of the southern herd will have their work cut out for them. A shortcut. An archmage could use a plenipotentiary with Kimus or Ossagran to seek their aid accessing water in Nadir. Both Eternals are certain to want something significant in return for their aid. The Skurrans would be interested in buying water from Nadir if the Empire pursued either option. The plan for a new great herd is ambitious and complex, requiring a market for cattle stock in the Marchers and the goodwill of military unit captains. Members of the Golden Pyramid present in the territory are able to offer an alternative proposal. Their surveys indicate that there may be a very deep water reservoir in Nadir, far below the usual level of groundwater. Why not ask a suitable Eternal to provide help accessing them? The question is, which Eternal? After consultation with various mages, a consensus is formed. There are 2 obvious potential choices: Kimus or Ossagran. Both are Eternals the Empire has dealt with before and whose concerns are known to them. So, while the details of any negotiation would presumably be for the relevant archmage to conduct, it is possible to estimate what their likely responses will be. Kimus will certainly be able to pinpoint the location of the deep water sources in the territory, allowing the Empire to dig boreholes to get at the water. Ossagran might be able to provide a magical means to bring water to the surface of Nadir. The Eternal could presumably cause water sources to bubble and rise from the deep earth to the living soils above if they wanted. Whichever Eternal the Empire asks, they are likely to want something significant in return for their aid. It is difficult to know what Kimus might ask for, but Cupbearer's pacifist nature is at odds with many actions the Empire would wish to take, so any negotiations would have to be handled carefully. To pursue either option would require the Archmage of the relevant realm to use a plenipotentiary to ask the Eternal for their aid. The Skurrans are nonplussed at the notion of treating with Eternals. It appears to be an activity they have very little familiarity with. If the Empire succeeded at finding water by any means, they would be very interested in buying any surplus water back off the Empire, if they could agree an ongoing fee for the supply with the Empire. The Icarian Streams. There are sources of water in Icarian and in neighbouring Spiral. Either, or both, could be used to transform the region. None of the plans discussed for Nadar or Yoradal would help in Icarian, overlooking the sea from jutting cliffs. A lighthouse stands here in the older as any style, but no lightstone shines there. The hills of neighbouring Apolus run down into Icarian, leaving a few mining settlements here and there, small camps who dwell in the dry ruins of Urizen's forgotten expansion south. These settlements deliver wagons of iron and copper, along with crates of orichalcum and green iron down to the town of Agnia in Sinfiard. The hills are lower here, more exposed and licked at by the bitter winds of the bay. There are plenty of streams in the foothills, but the precious water hurries down to the sea. Unlike Yoradal, there are no remnants of previous irrigation works here, so any efforts to get that water to the right location will be expensive and require significant expertise. Fortunately, the Freeborn have a great deal of expertise doing exactly that. A new Kanat. The Freeborn visitors to Merev are experienced at building a Kanat, a network of tunnels that would distribute water across the region. If the Empire builds a Kanat in Merev, it will remove the arid quality. If the work is commissioned, the Imperial Orcs could ask a Sept to help the Brass Coast in Feroz or Madruga instead of Merev. The Freeborn visitors to Merev are experts at creating Kanats, underground channels that protect water from the heat of the sun as it is distributed over a large area. They could help the Imperial Orcs living here build a new Icarian Kanat to rival the one the Zemres Islanders created in Segura. The irrigation provided by the Kanat would supply much needed water, but it would not be cheap. It would need 40 wains of weirwood and 120 crowns, increased to 144 crowns while Icarian remains underdeveloped, and take 2 seasons to construct. Once complete, the new network of tunnels would remove the arid quality from the region. Building the Icarian Kanat would be possible without the help of the freeborn farmers and business owners who have come to the territory at the urging of their assembly. The civil service will provide oversight for the project as normal if it is commissioned by the Imperial Senate, but the input of the freeborn with experience creating and maintaining a Kanat network will be essential to oversee the labour. In an ideal world, the people from the Brass Coast might expect to be well paid for their services. The freeborn are not a greedy people, but they know the value of their skills and they are not usually shy about asking for payment. This Kanat can't be built without their help, but those who have come to Merev at the urging of their assembly seem unwilling to exploit their monopoly. Perhaps they can see how poor Merev is, or maybe it is just a genuine desire to help. Freeborn will always offer to pay before sitting down to eat at a friend's table. But if you are welcome at the feast, then the price is a token payment in rings. Either way, there is a blunt reality that these people could have been back at home on the coast, looking to their own problems in Madruga or Feroz. Instead, they are here, offering their skills to the people of Merev. A few Imperial Orcs are keen to find a way to repay the Brass Coast for this aid. There isn't the wealth in the nation to pay them what their skills are worth, but perhaps there is a way the Imperial Orcs could return this favour. For the next year, each of the 6 septs of the Imperial Orcs is in a position to come to Merev to look for ways to use their unique skills and outlook to explore the opportunities there. Given the generosity of the freeborn in offering to help the Imperial Orcs even when their own lands are suffering, there are enough orcs in every sept who would be prepared to return the favour. Rather than exploring Merev for a season, the Imperial Orc Assembly could ask one of their septs to Madruga or Feroz instead. The Imperial Orcs could settle the debt, paying in kind by seeking ways to offer their unique help to the freeborn as they try to rebuild their lands with a simple mandate. Our people know the worth of all things. We send our priest with 25 doses of Liao to urge the sept to find ways to help. Let us show them what their help was worth to us. Synod Mandate, Imperial Orcs National Assembly. If the mandate is passed, members of the named sept will make a point of travelling to either Feroz or Madruga to explore the opportunities there. This mandate would replace one of the opportunities to ask a sept to seek ways to help in Merev. It can be used for as long as that opportunity remains available, but it must be a sept that has not already been asked to help in Merev or the Brass Coast. The way less taken. The Empire could dam the river in Doubt in Spiral to divert water into Icarian. The project would require fewer Bourse materials, but would need the support of an Imperial army. If the Empire dam the Doubt, it will remove the arid quality. The Archmage could use Plenipotentiary to ask Elenwe to help protect the army from the effects of the Black Plateau. A visiting Urizeni, Severina, has an alternative suggestion to building a new Kanat network in Icarian. There is water on the other side of the border. There are rivers that run from the mountains of Apstrus down to Apulus and then to the sea. Apulus is too low to bring water from there to Icarian economically, but Apstrus is not. The largest river in the area, the River Doubt, used to be home to a large spire. Potentially, a dam could be constructed on the Doubt, flooding the area to create a reservoir and, with care, diverting some of the waters of Apstrus through the narrow mountain passes and into Icarian. That now abandoned spire is called Solon's Doubt. The name has a foreboding pedigree. It was at Solon's Doubt 5 years ago that the madness that had been building in Spiral came to a crescendo, from which it has not quieted since. It was here that the dark forces of the Black Plateau awoke in full, unleashed by the depredations of the Iron Helms and the frenzied killing of blood-stained battles. In an instant, 3 Grendel armies were broken. Only the bravest travellers make the trip up to that haunted place. Ghosts of the battles still linger there. The civil service confirm it would be possible to build the dam, but there are problems. The Empire could commission the dam as an edifice, requiring 30 wains of white granite. Since the bulk of the work would be in Spiral, it wouldn't suffer any economic penalties due to Icarian being underdeveloped. Unfortunately, the work would need to be done out in the open, in one of the most troubled sites in Spiral, outside Screed itself. Given the bloody reputation of the area, the hauntings and the pernicious influence of the Black Plateau, it would be impossible to hire any normal labourers to carry out the work. The only practical way the dam could be constructed is if the Tower Jacks or an Imperial army under the Bound by Common Cause enchantment carried out the work. The Tower Jacks include some of the Empire's most experienced engineers, which makes them the natural choice. But any Imperial army that was bound by common cause could work closely with the various groups involved. The army would need to be given appropriate defensive orders that explicitly said to construct a dam and turn the area in Apostrus into a reservoir. Then the work could be accomplished. That would mean the army spending time in Spiral, which would exert a heavy toll on the forces. It is impossible for armies to resupply in Spiral, and any army that sends a season there loses 5% of its maximum fighting strength each season, even if it is not engaged, due to the baleful influence of the plateau. Hundreds of Imperial lives would be lost constructing this dam. There might be a solution to this problem, however. Severina mentions that she has taken to travelling Spiral with water supplied to her by a herald of the Swan. She claims the water provides respite from the plateau, allowing her trouble-free dreams when she drinks it. Could the Archmage of Day implore Zai of the Perfect Morning to provide such protection to an Imperial army? And if they did, what might that strange Eternal demand for such a boon? Whether or not that could be solved, there is one problem that no Eternal can resolve. The ideal spot to dam the Doubt and create a reservoir is the Fallen Valley. However, this is where the majority of those who fell the day the Black Plateau awoke are buried. Thousands died that day. Countless soldiers from 8 Imperial armies lost their lives. The Red Wind Corsairs, the Towerjacks, the Summer Storm, the Wolves of War, the Winter Sun, the Citadel Guard, the Northern Eagle, and of course, the Iron Helms themselves. The National Assemblies of Urizen, the Imperial Orcs, the League, the Brass Coast, and Varushka might all have something to say about a plan that involves flooding the last resting place of so many of their heroes who gave their lives trying to free Spiral from the Grendel. Back and forth. The Empire could build the Kanat network and dam the Doubt. Doing so would provide a massive boost to irrigation in the region. Ikarian would cease to be arid and instead become an oasis. Taxation produced by the region would increase by 6 thrones a season. It would remove the uncooperative quality from Urodel. The two proposals for Ikarian are not mutually exclusive. It would be expensive, but the Empire could decide to dam the Doubt and build the Ikarian Kanat. They would need a separate Senate motion for each project, and the costs would be high, but the outcome would be truly impressive. The region would cease to be arid, but with so much water to spare, it would quickly become a green and verdant oasis in this dry land. If that happened, then the resulting boost to agriculture and water supply would help all settlements throughout the region grow. That would immediately improve imperial taxation for the territory, providing an additional 6 thrones per season to the imperial treasury for as long as the area remains an oasis. It would also create something truly astonishing, an extraordinary feat of engineering that could not help but impress the orcs who live in Urodel by demonstrating the depths of the Empire's commitment to the territory. As a result, it would also remove the uncooperative quality from Urodel. Timing. The Ikarian Kanat, the Great Southern Herd, and the chance to get help from Skura are available until the end of the Summer Solstice 387 YE. Asking Kimus, Ilenwe, or Ossagran for help, damming the Doubt or extending the Yellowfish Adit are available at any time. Some of these opportunities will not be available forever. The enthusiasm of the Skurans, the Marchers, and the Freeborn will inevitably diminish, and they will lose interest in the project if nothing happens. This means that the Ikarian Kanat, the Great Southern Herd, the healing pools, and repairing the aqueduct are only available until the end of the Summer Solstice 387 YE. If they have not been commissioned by the end of the Summer Solstice, the opportunity will be lost. The Doubt can be damned at any time. Likewise, there is no time limit on extending the Yellowfish Adit or asking any of the named Eternals for aid.